Good morning, Wilson. Today is Wednesday, January 4th, 2017. I'm Ryan O'Brien.
And I'm Peter Rivera.
Welcome to 2017. Last year was quite a year. We said hello to President-elect Donald Trump while saying goodbye to Prince, Muhammad Ali, and John Glenn, just to name a few.
We saw the power of peaceful protest at Standing Rock, and we saw the power of hate and gun violence at a nightclub in Orlando.
There was unspeakable loss and times that affirmed our American pride.
And through it all, we witnessed history.
And this was 2016. And this is your News in Minutes. For the first time ever, the temperatures in Alaska were so warm that the government had to ship snow in for the Iditarod sled dog race. TLC pulled the plug on their hit TV series 19 Kids and Counting after information service involving one of the Duggar sons, Josh.
Sheriff Joe Arpaio of Arizona, who was known for cracking down on illegal immigration and racial profiling, renewed his claim that President Obama's birth certificate was forged. This was in response to facing his own legal issues when he was charged with contempt of court in October. Emily Doe, the anonymous survivor of a sexual assault by Stanford University swimmer Brock Turner, left people at a loss for words with her powerful impact statement that gave a voice to sexual assault victims and forced the nation to have an important conversation about rape culture. After the case ended, California passed a law requiring longer sentences for defendants convicted of assaulting unconscious victims.
In sports news, the Denver Broncos, led by quarterback Peyton Manning, won the Super Bowl 50, the 50th one, which happened to be Manning's final game as well. A video released by the families of the victims of the Sandy Hook shooting in Connecticut released a video message urging watchers to look out for signs of gun violence, for it can be stopped if you know what to look for.
Former Delaware Senator and a two-term Vice President Joe Biden said he's not ruling out a possible run for the White House in the future. He is currently in charge of finding a cure for cancer, motivated by his son Beau's death from brain cancer in 2015. Omar Mateen embarked on a shooting spree at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida in June. Mateen, 29 years old, killed 49 people and left dozens injured in one of the deadliest shooting sprees in U.S. history. Mateen was later killed after a 3-hour standoff with police.
Georgia man Justin Ross Harris was found guilty of all charges against him for the death of his 22-month-old son, Cooper. Harris left his son in a hot car for 7 hours, leading to Cooper's death. Harris was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 32 years. The city of Chicago's death toll climbs on a near-daily basis and currently includes over 700 murders. Chicago serves as our nation's third-largest city. City officials blame the violence on a combination of increased gang activity and weak gun laws.
The investigation of sexual misconduct by the coaches of USA Gymnastics continues. At least 368 gymnasts have alleged some form of sexual abuse at the hands of their coaches, gym owners, and other adults who work within the gymnastic facilities. The longest-serving governor in U.S. history, Terry Branstad of Iowa, will serve as the U.S. ambassador to China under the Trump administration. Branstad, 70, has had a working relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping since 1985, when Xi visited Iowa on an agricultural mission.
10-year-old Caleb Schwab died from a fatal neck injury that he suffered while riding the Verrückt water slide at Schlitterbahn Water Park in Kansas City, Kansas. The ride stood 160 feet high at its tallest point, which is taller than Niagara Falls and the Statue of Liberty, and propelled rafts with 2 to 3 riders at speeds of up to 65 miles per hour. Residents of Louisiana were in a fight for their lives and homes when the southern state experienced horrific flooding in August. The flooding destroyed over 40,000 homes and was responsible for 13 deaths in the state.
The charges against 3 officers who were accused in the arrest and death of Freddie Gray were dropped, bringing an end to a tumultuous criminal case with 0 convictions. Gray, 25, died of neck injuries that he sustained while shackled and handcuffed without a seatbelt in the back of a police car in April of 2015. 6'3" David Ortiz ended his 20-year baseball career in October. Ortiz will be remembered as one of the greatest Red Sox players of all time.
The water in Flint, Michigan still isn't safe to drink. The state skipped necessary corrosion treatments that enabled lead to get into the old service pipes that provided water to residents. Everyone who drank the city's tap water was exposed, including as many as 8,657 children. The harmful impacts are considered most severe on young brains and nervous systems. President Obama declared a state of emergency while Congress approved legislation worth more than $120 million to deal with the ongoing crisis. During a break in football practice, a white student placed a noose around the neck of a black football player at the Stone High School in Wiggins, Mississippi. The noose was then yanked backward while on the student's neck. A few days later, the student was disciplined. However, due to the privacy rules, the student named nor his specific punishment could be disclosed.
After 21 years, the St. Louis Rams franchise will officially move back to Los Angeles. A new $2.6 billion stadium project is underway to welcome the Rams back to LA. The new stadium will cover nearly 300 acres near the LA airport. Former Navy SEAL Montana Representative Ryan Zink will lead the Interior Department of President-elect Trump's cabinet. Trump believes that Zink strikes the right balance between protecting the nation's natural resources and federal regulations.
2-year-old Nebraska toddler Lane Graves was killed after an alligator pulled him into the lagoon at Disney's Grand Floridian Resort in June while he and his family were staying there on vacation. Since the attack, Disney has posted additional warning signs around the park and built fences and other barriers around some of the waterfront areas. Democrat Catherine Cortez Masto defeated Republican Representative Joe Heck for a seat in the U.S. Senate. Masto made history with this defeat, becoming the first woman to represent Nevada in the U.S. Senate, as well as being the first Latina in Senate history.
New Hampshire was and still is facing a heroin and opiate epidemic. Opioid and heroin addiction have earned the distinction as the single greatest drug threat in the U.S., and the biggest area of concern is being able to fill the gap between people who need treatment and those able to get it. Two former associates of New Jersey Governor Chris Christie took the fall for a politically motivated bridge shutdown that stranded motorists in a massive traffic jam. 3 years ago, a jury found Bridget Ann Kelly, Christie's former deputy chief of staff, and Bill Barani, the former deputy executive director, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, guilty of charges tied to the George Washington Bridge closure. According to allegations, the bridge closure was payback after Fort Lee Mayor Mark Sokolik refused to endorse Governor Chris Christie's for re-election.
Tom Begay Jr. has been charged with first-degree murder, felony murder, kidnapping resulting in death, 2 counts of aggravated sexual abuse resulting in death, and 2 counts of kidnapping a minor. On May 2, 2016, 11-year-old Ashlyn Mike and her 9-year-old brother Ian were allegedly lured into Begay's van. He then drove the 2 children into the New Mexico desert where he molested and bludgeoned Ashlyn to death with a tire iron. Ian was released and was found walking along the highway. Ashlyn's body was discovered the next morning in the desert. During his presidential campaign, Donald Trump vowed not to settle the class action lawsuits against Trump University. Then, a little more than a week after winning the election, President-elect Trump agreed to settle the fraud cases involving the Trump University for $25 million. The deal does not require Trump to acknowledge any wrongdoing.
In Charlotte, North Carolina, plainclothes officers were serving a search warrant on September 20th at an apartment complex. They then spotted another man with a gun. The officers confront Keith Lamont Scott, who was waiting for his son's school bus. In a video captured by Scott's wife, 4 shots can be heard, followed by a woman demanding, "Did you shoot him?" The shots were fired by Officer Brent Vinson when Scott threatened the 2 officers with the gun, or at least appeared to. The builders of the 1,172-mile Dakota Access Pipeline project were told to find another way. Since spring, protesters have been gathering to stop the constructions of the oil pipeline that will go under a lake at the edge of the Standing of the Rock Indian reservation. This protest has been called the longest in modern history as well as the largest gathering of Native Americans in modern times. Law enforcement used tear gas and even water cannons on the crowds in an attempt to end the protests.
Oklahoma opened 2016 with a swarm of 70 small earthquakes in 1 week. The U.S. Geological Survey released a report citing the oil and gas drilling process as the cause. On January 2nd, a group of armed anti-government activists led by rancher Ammon Bundy rang in the new year by seizing a federal building at the Mahler National Wildlife Refuge in Oregon. They cited tough restrictions on grazing and other uses of federal land and had threatened their way of life. The standoff with authorities lasted for more than a month.
6 Catholic dioceses were being investigated by a grand jury in Pennsylvania after more than 50 priests or religious leaders were found to have abused children over a 40-year period. Also, comedian Bill Cosby was charged with drugging and raping a woman at his suburban Philadelphia home in 2004. Cosby's trial is scheduled to begin in 2017.
Hundreds of women, girls, and other supporters proudly donned yoga pants in October to peacefully parade around the Rhode Island neighborhood of a man who declared the attire as tacky and ridiculous in a letter to the editor that was published in the Barrington Times. In South Carolina, Dylan Roof was convicted of deaths of 9 parishioners at Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. After 6 days of testimony, it took a jury less than 2 hours to find him guilty of all 33 counts of lodged against him. In January, the deliberation as to whether Roof will face a life sentence or the death penalty will take place in January. People in South Dakota who refuse to cooperate with police for a urine sample may be forced to endure involuntary use of catheters. While the practice isn't new, it has been criticized as invasive and a constitutional violation. One South Dakota man who is charged with felony drug ingestion is asking a judge to throw out evidence in his case. He claims his constitutional rights were violated because he was subjected to an involuntary catheter after police suspected drug use.
The Great Smoky Mountains National Park and the resort town of Gatlinburg, Tennessee, have finally reopened to the public after devastating wildfires caused 14 deaths and damaged about 2,500 buildings. Prosecutors have charged 2 teenagers with the blazes. Animal rights group Compassion Over Killing captured video from inside several Tyson food facilities in Virginia of workers stomping, kicking, and suffocating breeder chickens. In an ironic moment caught on one of the videos that were released, a Tyson worker warned the undercover investigator that you can't let nobody see you do that as he steps on the chicken's head, suffocating it. You don't know if he's working for the animal rights. He then told the worker, who was in fact secretly working for the animal rights workers seen in the videos, were fired and left, and all live poultry workers were retained on the company's animal welfare policies.
Amazon, the company that made leaving your house to shop optional, has made leaving your wallet at home optional as well. At their brick-and-mortar store in Seattle, Washington, there are no cashiers nor self-checkout lines. Shoppers tap their phone at a sensor by the store's entrance and identified by camera. As they browse, cameras, microphones, and sensors capture where everything and everyone are at any moment. When shoppers leave, items get charged to their Amazon account. So far, Amazon has no plans to open any additional locations. A study conducted by the USA Today Network found that more than a dozen of West Virginia's utilities don't have owners or operations. Enforcement efforts for those utilities amount to little more than a continuous stream of warning letters as utilities failed to test their water for cleanliness year after year. All the while, residents continue drinking untested and potentially contaminated water.
Jerica Boland's final months on Earth and her heartbreaking decision to leave it made the nation fall in love with her. The 14-year-old girl from Appleton, Wisconsin, she announced that she was giving up her fight against spinal muscular atrophy type 2, a painful and incurable disease that plagued her all of her life. Boland's story inspired people from across the nation to help grant her dying wish by hosting a prom in her honor. She died at a Wisconsin hospice in September. Wyoming's treasured Yellowstone National Park saw some tragic deaths in 2016. In June, a 23-year-old Oregon man plunged into a boiling acidic spring. Colin Nathaniel Scott was trying to test the water so he and his sister could soak in the park's thermal pools when he fell into the springs. In August, a 21-year-old Estefania Lisette Mosquera Alcivar of Ecuador, a park concession worker, fell off a cliff overlooking the Grand Canyon as she was chatting with a friend.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of News in Minutes.
Make sure you check back next week for the next episode.
And make sure to follow Warrior News 15 on Instagram and Twitter.
For now, that's all we have. I'm Peter Rivera.
And I'm Ryan O'Brien. We'll see you in uno minuto. 1 minute. News in Minutes.